This scene is probably one of the most horrific scenes I've seen in my 34 years of law enforcement.
I just got a call from passerby. They were going by Twin Peaks, thought they heard a gunshot, looked over and saw a lot of people running.
May 17th, 2015, Waco, Texas. A massive shootout involving around 5 different biker gangs leaves a gruesome aftermath. 9 deaths, 18 people injured, and 177 detentions. Behind the bullets, complex web of interests points to a proxy war between bikers and cartels. These are 4 times the Hells Angels messed with the wrong cartels.
Dus omdat wij eigenlijk in principe in zo'n besloten gebeuren leven, weten de mensen eigenlijk helemaal niet wat er bij ons afspeelt. Dus het is eigenlijk allemaal maar raaien en doen, weet je wel. En een slechte naam heb je, is iemand, die bezorg je iemand heel erg snel natuurlijk.
February 11th, 2004. Paul de Vries, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Nomads, the Hells Angels Amsterdam C, Hapter in the Netherlands, is retained within the HAMC clubhouse and killed, along with 2 other club members. Even while their deaths were directly related to the Colombian drug cartels, this case ended with an unexpected plot twist that would leave a mark on the gang's history. Let's rewind to late 2002. Paul de Vries's rise inside the HAMC was meteoric. The man had a way of establishing lucrative international connections. That's why he contacted Angelo Diaz, a member of a Hells Angels puppet gang in Curacao. He would use him as a contact for a major operation involving Colombian cartels. Posing as a fisherman, Diaz was actually a crucial middleman who used a fleet of boats to smuggle drugs across the sea. De Vries was already traveling frequently to Curacao for minor drug smuggling operations, but when he met a man named Tony Klassen, he devised a plan to take the Angels to a new level. Diaz arranged a meeting with a Colombian syndicate known as Cartel de la Costa, or North Coast Cartel, a drug smuggling organization that operated in northern Colombia. De Vries proposed that they move 300 kilograms of cocaine from Colombia into the Netherlands. This way, the Hells Angels would control the cocaine business in Europe, with an initial shipment valued at a staggering $3 million. He struck a deal. The profits were to be divided 50-50 between the bikers and the cartels, but only after the drugs had been sold and the money had changed hands. The Colombians kept their promise and sent the shipment, but somehow De Vries informed them the drugs got stuck in Brazil. The truth was that they were safe in Europe. Paul De Vries had seized them and sold the entire shipment, pocketing the total profits for himself. He dared to rip off a major Colombian cartel in direct violation of the HAMC rules. He went even further and allegedly murdered a member, a man named Cunningham, who was ready to speak up and air his betrayal. Local authorities suspected De Vries had something to do with Cunningham's disappearance, but other forces were moving in the dark, ready to hand out justice much quicker and ruthlessly. Things took a dark turn pretty hastily. On one hand, De Vries's actions were a stupidly bold act that offended a powerful Latin American drug cartel. On the other hand, he had violated his club statutes. The Hells Angels have a strict rule against ripping off cartels, which is a major sin that can erode their credibility and put the entire organization in danger. To no one's surprise, his reputation immediately began to shatter. To make matters worse, De Vries began forcing his club members to pay extra fees to cover the expenses of his daughter's extravagant wedding. Instead of using the stolen money everybody knew he had, he was a disgraceful chapter president, and the HAMC was ready to overthrow him. But this wasn't easy. He was the man capable of establishing the valuable international contacts the club depended on. Meanwhile, the people from the cartel figured out and were demanding their money. This situation went south. This wasn't a war the chapter could win. The internal tension reached its peak, and a member of the Nomads chapter secretly met with the Hells Angels leadership. An unthinkable request was approved: permission to get rid of De Vries. Everybody was moving in secret, De Vries included. The authorities would later reveal that they were also watching the events unfold. Police had secretly recorded a chilling conversation in which De Vries arranged a meeting at a sushi bar to talk about purging his own charter to eliminate the ones he believed were no longer loyal to him. We will never know where the orders came from, but the truth is, his days were numbered since the very moment he decided to steal from the Colombians.
Sandra de Vries uit Geldrop verloor 6 jaar geleden haar man en vader. Beiden waren lid van de Nomads, de Limburgse chapter van de Hells Angels. Samen met een clubgenoot werden vader Paul de Vries en man Cor Pijnenburg vermoord. door andere Hells Angels.
On that February night, De Vries and his 2 faithful bodyguards walked into a trap within their own clubhouse. They were captured and dealt with quickly. The 3 men were lined up against a wall and shot to death by the coup plotters. As a reminder of the new order, the new chapter leaders repainted the clubhouse and hung a picture with the word Omerta, the famous mafia code of silence.
Whoever appeals to the law against his fellow men is either a fool or a coward. Whoever cannot take care of himself without that law is both. For a wounded man shall say to his assailant, "If I live, I will kill you. If I die, you are forgiven." Such is the rule of honor.
The authorities found the 3 victims quickly. The new directive of the nomads, with full support from the HAMC hierarchy, had disposed of them in shallow graves. De Vries's funeral became a continent-wide event when people heard about his death. Countless Hells Angels from all countries attended. Among them, Angelo Diaz, De Vries's contact from Curaçao, was there to pay his respects and maybe look for some answers. This didn't please the new leadership of the Nomads chapter, because they suspected Diaz had played a significant role in De Vries's deception, no matter if the orders were coming from the HAMC or from the resentful Cartel. Diaz was a dead man. They immediately kidnapped him and took him to a secluded area, but he was lucky. A passerby stumbled upon the kidnapping scene while walking his dog, and the Nomads had to call off the operation. Diaz was released and, fearing for his life, immediately contacted the local police.
13 Hells Angels verschijnen vandaag en morgen voor de rechter. Ze zouden betrokken zijn bij de moord op 3 Angels die in het Limburgse Echt in februari dood werden gevonden in een beek.
He became a key witness in De Vries's murder case. In exchange for protection, Diaz told the authorities everything he knew. That's how the authorities completed the puzzle, including the murders, De Vries's betrayal, the cocaine ripoff, and the coup that ended his life. With his testimony, police secured several arrests in the case. A total of 12 people were convicted for their roles in the murder, from the top names who gave the order to the members who carried out the executions. In the end, the Hells Angels sacrificed their own brothers for the higher good, peace with the Colombian cartel, and an ongoing lucrative business partnership.
Gordon Kendall and Jeffrey Ivins were murdered in a condo in Puerto Vallarta, shot several times at close range. RCMP suggests both had ties to BC's drug trade.
September 2009, Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco. The brutal eruption of several armed members of the Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel suddenly shatters a condominium complex. Gordon Kendall, 31, and Jeffrey Ivins, 30, a couple of Canadian drug smugglers allegedly tied to the Hells Angels in British Columbia, were gunned down execution style with several shots at close range. Mexican authorities arrived later, only to find their bodies and confirmed the 2 men had reportedly been living in Mexico for some time. According to one of the victims' fathers, they were going back and forth between Mexico and Canada to secure land deals. The reality was much darker.
He obviously stepped on somebody's toes. What it was related to, I don't know.
He said to CBC News after learning from their programming that his son was shot dead. The 2 men were involved in cocaine trading in the Vancouver area and were after a bigger payoff for their operation. They planned to bypass any U.S. middleman, raising the price of the product. This way, they could get their cocaine straight from Mexico. By purchasing directly from the supplier, they would reduce the cost of every kilo from $20,000 when bought in Los Angeles to something between $8,000 and $10,000 in Jalisco. This territory was completely out of their league. In the big picture of the ongoing Mexican drug wars, they were simple, naive amateurs. No matter how big their connections in Canada or how close they were to the Hells Angels in Vancouver, they were nobodies in Mexico. Just small-time dealers overstepping the lines of one of the most dangerous and sadistic cartels in the region. The CJNG's operations go deeper than they could ever fathom. Clashes with enemy cartels, local authorities infiltrated, and a web of corruption that ensures no foreigner could easily navigate the drug trade landscape. According to witness accounts, the attack began with a single gunman approaching the men outside their apartment building and shooting Gordon Kendall. Jeffrey Ivins was carrying a gun, but apparently was unable to use it, so he fled toward the resort's pool area. 2 additional gunmen arrived on the scene and chased Ivins down. Once they got to him, the 3 assailants repeatedly shot the 2 Canadians, ensuring their deaths. The police later found a pickup truck with Canadian plates, a Hummer, and a Mercedes-Benz with Mexican plates. All these vehicles were registered to the victims at the scene, proving they were amassing fortunes beyond what their families in Canada ever knew. Back in Canada, the police shattered victims' public image with their revelations, while they were being remembered by by friends on social media as witty, charming, and nice. The authorities offered context for their murders. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police's Integrated Gang Task Force confirmed that both Kendall and Ivins were known to police and were suspected of being involved in the drug trade. They had been aware of their participation in the international drug trade for some time. Gordon Kendall's family stated he had no criminal history, while Jeffrey Ivins had a minor drug trafficking conviction in 2002, which cost him only a $1,000 fine.
It shows you how naive these gangsters up here are. They think they can go down there and play ball with those guys. They're tied in with the army and the authorities and corruption.
Initially, Canadian authorities didn't disclose the victim's affiliation with the Hells Angels and said they allegedly worked with gangs from the Vancouver area. Instead, Mexican authorities, on the other hand, never officially determined a motive for the killings and made no arrests in the case, leaving it unsolved, like many other hundreds of drug-related killings in the country. December 21, 2024, Canadian wanted man Mathieu Barbu Bélanger from Repentigny, Quebec, left the gym and was walking in the parking lot of a shopping plaza. He had successfully evaded Canadian authorities after they issued a nationwide warrant for drug trafficking and his deep ties to the Hells Angels. However, he could not evade the fury of the Mexican drug cartels. As he climbed into his new luxury black Jeep SUV with no plates, two bikers pulled up with large guns and stopped alongside the vehicle. The gunfire noise was over quickly. Bélanger, 39, was shot 5 times in the head in a professional-style hit. The luxury vehicle wasn't taken, and no personal belongings disappeared. It was clear that this wasn't a random murder. It was quickly revealed that Bélanger was a high-ranking individual among the Hells Angels. He had built a sophisticated bridge between the Canadian biker underworld and the Mexican cartels, acting as a middleman between the Hells Angels and the Los Chapitos faction, the Sinaloa cartel, as he moved merchandise across the United States. Canadian authorities had clearly identified him as an important supplier of massive quantities of cocaine to the Hells Angels in Quebec. Wanted and all, he had been comfortably living in Playa del Carmen with his partner, Andre Vignola Sullivan, and their 3 children for the last couple of years. They had successfully crossed international borders by procuring forged Mexican documents, stepping away from their wanted identities. According to the Journal de Montreal, the police had information confirming his lavish lifestyle and his major role in the cocaine trade from his new base in Mexico. It was a matter of time before the bad news came. Back in April, Bélanger had been stopped at a federal highway roadblock by Mexican police and arrested after a search of his vehicle. He was carrying a revolver, ammunition, and a large quantity of methamphetamine. Being this sloppy would have consequences. While he used his influence and the corruption around him to leave jail almost immediately, the extremely violent drug cartels would not be so easily appeased. With no way to confirm their suspicions, analysts theorize that Bélanger's shooting might have been the result of some fatal transgression against his suppliers, namely the loss of product in this operation or another one. Maybe he attempted to make an additional buck beyond the cartel's guidelines, failed to deliver a shipment, or went crazy and tried to establish his own independent route or network. In the end, the economics of the drug trade were unforgiving. Any form of competition with the cartel's interest meant death. More than a dozen empty shell casings found next to his SUV proved this was a calculated act of vengeance. The death of Mathieu Barbu Bélanger is just another unsolved murder with no arrests, announced that echoes the 2009 case we saw at the beginning, where Gordon Kendall and Jeffrey Ivins were executed in a similar fashion in Puerto Vallarta. One of the many reminders to the Hells Angels that big cartel jurisdictions are simply out of their league.
It's a staggering number. 170 bikers facing murder charges after the Battle of Waco. Biker dude after biker dude. Even a biker chick.
The Waco shootout of 2015 revolves around the very foundation of the American Outlaw Motorcycle Clubs, also known as OMCs, the groups of bikers who operate on a strict hierarchical and territorial basis across the United States and several other countries around the world. In this biker battle royale, 5 major gangs were involved. On one hand, we have the Outlaws, a motorcycle club affiliated with the Hells Angels. On the other hand, a supergroup composed of the Cossacks, the Bandidos, the Mongols, Mongols, and the Scimitars. But what happened here really? We can say the primary adversaries in this super brawl were the two Texas-based clubs. The Bandidos Motorcycle Club, which self-proclaims a fat Mexican organization, is the fourth largest motorcycle club in the world with 300 chapters in 22 countries, and the Cossacks Motorcycle Club, a smaller but rapidly growing club comprising the second largest biker gang in Texas, and challenging the traditionally claimed sovereignty of the Bandidos in Texas territories. Basically, they have a long-standing dispute regarding the Cossacks' refusal to pay the Bandidos dues for operating in the state, since they control a wide range of criminal activities, including assault, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, and murder. The two gangs are natural rivals and bound to go to war with one another at the slightest provocation, but the violence that exploded at the Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco was far from a spontaneous event. It was the boiling point of a long rivalry, intertwined with backup from other motorcycle gangs and international criminal syndicates. Let's get back in time and take a quick look at timelines to understand their violent back and forth. In November 2013, Bandidos Abilene chapter president was arrested for stabbing two members of the Cossacks outside a restaurant. Later, in December 2014, a Cossack was beaten by Bandidos at a Toys for Tots event in Decatur, Texas. In retaliation, in March 2015, 10 Cossack members forced a lone Bandido off the road near Lorena, Texas, beat him with chains and metal pipes, and stole their motorcycle in a symbolic power move against the bigger club, a direct challenge to their authority over the state roads. In a separate incident that same day, Bandidos tried to send the opposite message when they beat a Cossack's head with a hammer and stole his vest after the guy refused to remove his Texas bottom rocker patch. By May 1st, 2015, Texas Department of Public Safety had issued an advisory to law enforcement. Both the Bandidos and the Cossacks were regarded as highly dangerous, and they feared the escalation was leading to a full-fledged gang war. By this point, you might be wondering, how do the Cartels and the Hells Angels fit into this rivalry? The answer is a short, complex one: proxy wars.
Investigators have been combing through the parking lot of this Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco, Texas, where dozens of motorcycles and multiple dead riders marked the scene of Sunday's violent shootout.
Well hidden in the shadows, the Hells Angels and Los Zetas were struggling to control Texas. They were the puppeteers behind all the minor drug-related fights, the forces at war to control the drug distribution business in the state. The HAMC, the biggest motorcycle gang in the United States and the world. Los Zetas, a relatively new, bloodthirsty, and sadistic Mexican cartel that stemmed as an independent organization from the enforcement arm of the Gulf Cartel in 2010. The local feud between the Bandidos and the Cossacks was only a minor reflection of a much larger, transnational criminal power struggle. As criminal allies, the Bandidos were supposed to clear the roads for Los Zetas' product. The cartel would supply them with drugs and assign them delivery points. Here's when the rest of the motorcycle clubs come into play. The Cossacks, while a smaller Texas club, are described as being affiliated with the Hells Angels. Now, these are major words because the Hells Angels are a worldwide enterprise considered an organized crime syndicate by the U.S. government. No matter how much they dent it, the HAMC is the local equivalent of a big cartel inside the states and beyond. They are involved in drug trafficking, murder, and violence on 6 continents. And if you haven't yet guessed it, the Hells Angels had a long history of rivalry with the Bandidos, including distant and bombastic bloodfests as the Great Nordic Biker War that raged in Scandinavia from 1993 to 1997. Of course, they were going to have a problem with the Bandidos being puppets for Los Zetas. Now, with this convoluted context, we can see beyond what the news painted for the public: a mindless parking brawl that got out of control. But no parking brawl ends with 9 people dead, right? Not every day do you see a cowardly biker trying to cut another biker's throat from behind. No, the Waco shootout was a battle, and a multi-billion-dollar drug market was the bounty.
Police say the rumble erupted over a parking issue, starting with fists and feet inside and quickly escalating to the parking lot with chains, clubs, knives, and firearms.
May 17, 2015, Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco. The Bandidos scheduled a regional meeting of the Confederation of Clubs and Independents, a sort of neutral ground for motorcycle clubs and independent riders, to discuss biker matters and political inclinations. Their idea was for the meeting to be a show of force, a statement that Waco was not a Cossacks' town. The Cossacks, however, decided to attend the meeting uninvited, and at least a dozen local police officers and state troopers were already nearby to monitor the tense gathering. But everything went south when the Cossacks and their allies, including members of the Scimitars and the Mongols, took over the patio area reserved for the meeting. It is not really clear who threw the first punch or if someone really nearly tried to run over another biker, but chaos erupted like flames. According to witnesses, there were visible guns everywhere, and the noise was quickly dominated by semi-automatic weapons fire, knives, chains, metal pipes, and fists. Video footage of the event captured the horror: fleeing people, shooting people, bleeding people running in every direction, and ducking for cover. The police quickly responded to the gunfire and invoked the active shooter protocol, a direct permission to use deadly force after being shot at. The SWAT team ended the brawl in minutes, and in the bloody crime scene, at least 4 men had been allegedly hit by the police bullets. The authorities recovered at least 475 weapons from the scene and seized over 130 motorcycles.
SWAT teams fired back, ending the brawl within seconds. At least 100 bikers were detained, and on surrounding freeways, police pursued other riders for questioning.
The legal aftermath of the Waco shootout was a disaster. Then District Attorney Abel Reyna made the controversial decision to arrest and charge everyone present. If they had a motorcycle club patch, they were arrested. The cops handcuffed nearly 200 people, including a woman named Morgan English, who wasn't even a club member. They arrested so many people that they had to gather them at the Waco Convention Center for processing. The prosecutorial response was widely criticized since they went with this all-in strategy in which they ended up indicting 107 people present at the incident. This legal strategy was deemed a goat rodeo from the beginning by a special prosecutor on the case. They omitted fill-in-the-blank warrants for engaging in organized criminal activity. This means that there was nobody officially being charged for any murder or any specific beating. The warrants alleged that each arrested person was a member of a OSH criminal street gang who conspired to commit murder, capital murder, or aggravated assault. With these ridiculous proceedings in place, legal experts condemned the approach as brazen overreach. The investigation became an immediate laughingstock for being done completely backwards, since they first charged people and then proceeded to investigate. Despite the 155 effective indictments, only Jake Carrizal, a member of the Bandidos, ever went to trial. The state of Texas spent $1.5 million in this 6-week circus that ended in a deadlock jury and a mistrial in November 2017. After a 4-year fiasco, they got a total of 0 convictions. Let's repeat that. After 9 deaths, 18 people injured, and millions of taxpayer dollars spent in court proceedings, nobody went to prison for the 2015 Waco shootout.
The Waco prosecutor, Abel Reyna, who pursued charges against more than 100 bikers following a deadly 2015 shootout, is now out of a job, thanks in part to local bikers.
The bikers were the ones who held law enforcement accountable for the incident. While far away, across the border, the Zetas cartel was the only winner in the Proxy wars, securing their dominion over the drug trade while still keeping their pawns in place.